House Bill 772, Human Relations, Civil Rights Enforcement, Powers of the Attorney General. Favorable report is amended and adopted.
Recognizing the Minority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As we'd indicated last night, we have ordered and requested 2 amendments. The amendment that I was prepared to offer is not quite back yet from the Amendments Office. It's probably a little bit more technical. There is an amendment from another member that would be, I think, in order to offer today on the bill. And if the Speaker would indulge me, I would yield to the gentleman from St. Mary's County for the purpose of offering that amendment.
Gentleman from St. Mary's.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Amendment number 553221/1.
Amendment number 1.
So be considered reading of that amendment.
So ordered.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Friends, this bill reminds me of the bill that we had on the floor last week that we had very brief debate about, Hb772, the Office of Domestic Terrorism. And as a Republican, I'm always apprehensive on some of these bills that really expand government and authorize different agencies to be, I guess, more active. Because I know that nobody infringes on civil rights or individuals or businesses quite like the government has the ability to do that. This bill authorizes the Attorney General's office to sue businesses, people that infringe on civil rights, which at first blush is a good thing. We normally leave that up to the feds. The bill also talks about working with the State of Maryland Civil Rights Commission. Now, here's the thing. We had a briefing on this earlier in the year. I'm looking at it right now. They printed up this nice book. And it talked about discrimination reports by county. The first thing that jumps out at this book is, the areas where you think discrimination would be occurring. In the red area, it's almost non-existent. But per this book, per the Civil Rights book, Commission's book they put out, it's 623 cases in year 2021, which I didn't really think was that high considering we have 6.3 million people in the state of Maryland. But I remember during the testimony asking them, I'm like, well, how many of these cases are fraudulent? And the gentleman that runs the commission was very nice, and he said about 50%. 50% of the cases were fraudulent. So this bill empowers the Attorney General. And I said it was ripe for abuse. So let's think about what we've done with the Attorney General's office the last 5 years. We've empowered it from the Maryland General Assembly and really unhandcuffed them. And let's see, if you ask yourself a question, have they behaved politically? And the answer is overwhelmingly yes. Over the last 3-4 years, especially during the Trump administration, they had dozens upon dozens of lawsuits over and over again that were completely politically driven and just really not behaving appropriately, especially with the $1 million that we gave them to act politically. So what this amendment does for this bill is very simple. If the Attorney General brings a case and the defendant is found not guilty, well, it makes the state of Maryland responsible for the defendant's attorney's fees. And if you look at it, it says, I'm going to read the amendment, in any civil action brought under this part, the court may award the prevailing defendant reasonable attorney fees. I think that's more than fair. It's completely reasonable and completely immoral. And I move the amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Chairman of the committee.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd ask the body to resist the amendment. They can already get fees back if the case is brought by the state, in this case under the bill, in bad faith. That's our law. That's been our law. It's right that is our law, that's the standard. The Attorney General's office has limited resources. It's going to have limited resources to bring these kinds of suits in the first place, so they're going to have to pick the ones that they believe are the ones that are the biggest and most substantial ones. They're not going to want to run afoul of having to pay the attorney fees, and that's why there is that standard that says if they bring something in bad faith, then the attorney fees aren't covered. So with that, Madam Speaker, I'd ask the body resist the amendment.
The minority.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And what my friend, the committee chair, said is absolutely true. There is a provision, I think it's Maryland Rule 1341, that suggests that if you maintain a civil action in bad faith, you can be subject to sanctions by the court. And what I would suggest to you is that it is a commonly well-known fact among everyone who litigates in the state of Maryland that almost never happens. Very, very seldom ever happens. And it would be extraordinarily unlikely for it to happen in an attorney general action, because the court would determine that the attorney general had this process to review and investigate, and if they had any belief whatsoever, even if it turned out that they were wrong, that their action was thus not maintained in bad faith, because they have these sort of processes and procedures to eliminate someone from just rushing. The attorney general isn't a normal litigant. They don't just rush to the courtroom and file the suit. But the attorney general's office, like all of us, is sometimes wrong. They sometimes get it wrong. Sometimes witnesses lie. Sometimes witnesses or complainants overstate things. Sometimes political zeal or professional zeal overtakes sound judgment, and they get it wrong. And I think what the gentleman's amendment would suggest is this. When you're the state of Maryland, the $63 billion Leviathan, the largest law firm in the state of Maryland by a wide margin is the Attorney General's office, by a wide margin. And when you come after Joe's Body Shop or Sally's local hotel or Pete and Jamie's hairdressing salon, and when you come after them and they don't have a law firm and they're just trying to hire people and they can afford $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, and you allege something as severe, as significant, as disqualifying in modern life in many ways as a civil rights violation is today, it is aberrant, it is ridiculous, it is absurd and shameful to conduct yourself in a racially discriminatory way. No one should challenge that. It's terrible. There's no explanation, there's no justification for it. But when that individual or that small business is charged, essentially, is alleged to have committed these types of actions, and they fight for their business, they fight for their reputation, they say, I did not do this, I would not do this, this is not how it happened, this was not my intent, this is not what occurred. They will have two options probably against the Attorney General's office. They will probably bankrupt themselves in order to defend their business and their reputation. And so their business will be shuttered. If they don't have the availability of this amendment to say, if you're wrong, Attorney General's office, if a fact finder concludes I didn't do it, I'm not a civil rights violator, I'm not a racist, I'm not discriminatory against those with disabilities, I would not do that, I did not do that, and they win, it's a Pyrrhic victory if by winning their business, their livelihood is shut down because of their attorney's fees in fighting the Leviathan of the Attorney General's office. And I think all the gentleman's amendment tries to do is provide an opportunity for those small businesses and the lawyers who choose to represent them to say, if we are right and if we are successful, there is recourse for you so that you will not be bankrupted. It won't happen very often, but it may happen. And I think that's why the amendment is well considered, and I hope the chamber considers it that way. Thank you.
Maker of the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. If you read this bill, it sets up a specialty fund. So getting these monies back from when there's a fraudulent lawsuit, that the people are found innocent, the government is not drowning you in legal fees, I mean, it's only right. This is the moral argument to be made on this bill, on this amendment. It is the right thing to do. I move the amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Gentlelady from Hartford.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have a question for the amendment maker, because I don't know the answer. Could you get insurance for something like this? Because I don't think you could, but I don't know. And I mean, if you're a small business, I mean, and you don't have any ability to have something, and the biggest law firm in the state of Maryland comes after you, to be able to fight back, or at least to get legal counsel. So, you know, that is paid for by your insurance company. So I just kind of wanted to ask that question.
To answer your question honestly, I have no idea what insurance products are out there. I don't think there's any to cover for civil rights infractions. And look, there's probably none out there because this is a brand new law that's being passed. But to me, and Right. I just don't see that actually happening where someone's actually going to get through the trouble of purchasing insurance. This is, yeah, I don't think that'll be happening.
Chairman of the committee.
Thank you again, Madam Speaker. Again, I'd ask the body to resist the amendment. Again, we have a standard already in place that says that if the Attorney General's office was to bring something in bad faith, then there is an action available so that people can get those attorneys' fees back. We don't want to stop the Attorney Generals from bringing cases in good faith. That's what we want the Attorney General to do. We want them to do their due diligence, and we know, again, because of relatively limited resources, they're only going to be able to bring a certain number of these cases. They're going to be in the most serious cases, and they are going to want to make sure, because of that, that they're not cases that are fraudulently brought. And for that reason, we don't need this amendment. And thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from the Eastern Shore.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think a key point that the minority leader made was that in practice, what the floor leader was saying hardly ever happens. So I do have a question for the floor leader. So in your experience, is what he was saying true or not true?
Committee chair.
In my experience, I don't deal with civil cases, I deal with criminal ones. So, but from what I understand, again, in the bill, we don't have this generally in our entire civil system. We don't have this as a rule. This is basically the English common law rule, is what the delegate from St. Mary's is bringing forward. We are under the American rule, where we don't allow people to seek those fees unless, again, the case is brought in bad faith.
I appreciate the answer. So I guess the answer probably is that you agree with, and it sounds like, that in practice this hardly ever happens. So it's critically important that this body actually give the opportunity for folks who were charged unfairly with a civil crime to be reimbursed for their attorney's fees. It just seems like the right thing to do, and I hope that this body will actually do that, because obviously what's written in law and what's actually in practice are two different things. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from St. Mary's.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My understanding is that what's currently in law is the bad faith standard, and it's almost impossible to prove, or hasn't been proven recently. So what this amendment does is try to put it on a level playing field. There should be some checks and balances. If you're going to come after a business or an individual with the full weight of the Maryland government behind you, which is what the Attorney General's office says, look, there has to be some consequences for when they make a mistake or when they bring a fraudulent case where the person is not guilty. I mean, that's only right. And I would say that if you don't believe this is happening, or if you don't believe that the Attorney General's office, at least the last one, was politically motivated, look at the past results. Just with the last administration alone, there was dozens of lawsuits. And I'm not aware of a single one that was actually fulfilled to a point there was conviction. So we're drowning people in legal fees. This is only the right moral thing to do. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker.
Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I do just want to correct the record a little bit on the Defense of Maryland Act we passed a few years ago to empower the Attorney General to bring those suits to the federal government. Those weren't criminal suits. They weren't even civil suits in the sense of what we're describing here, so there wouldn't be quote-unquote convictions, but there were many, many successful efforts to stop illegal rules the court found illegal, being promulgated by the federal government. That's how our system works. Right now, there are many attorneys general in other states bringing suits against the current federal government, just as there was two presidencies ago, to make sure that the rules that this administration is promulgating also comply with our laws and constitution. So the Defense of Maryland Act was quite successful despite the claims of the gentleman, and I would join the committee chair in urging the body to resist this unnecessary and ill-advised amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
On the amendment, all in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Roll call.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Clerk, call the roll. The amendment fails. Are there any additional amendments to